Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Welcome to the show today. I'm your host, Angie Lewis. Today we have Darryl Chatman. He's the former Deputy Director of the Missouri Department of Agriculture. He is a counsel at Armstrong Teasdale and has worked for many large corporations in the agricultural industry. Darryl, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, nice to be here, Angela.
Now, Darryl, how did you become interested in agriculture?
I grew up in St. Louis, and I get asked this a lot, but St. Louis is an ag town, with Monsanto. Now Nestle Purina, used to be Ralston Purina. My father worked for Ralston Purina. Monsanto, Danforth Plant Science Center. We go on and on. And we've got a huge agriculture industry here, and it's growing. We've got a booming biotech or ag biotech sector here. I'm very excited about that. So growing up here, initially Monsanto was my main drive to get into agriculture. I went to Mizzou on a football scholarship, but got into the ag school with the hopes of getting a job eventually one day at Monsanto.
So with your background and understanding of agriculture, what are some things that have changed over the past 10 years?
In agriculture?
Yes.
Well, we were constantly moving more towards genetic modification of crops and applying science to how we produce food and how we produce feed for animals. And I would say that movement has been pretty strong over the last 10 years. Also, we've seen a movement kind of in another direction to more organic and natural and locally grown food. And that's a good thing as well. I think that some people view it as negative. Some people are indifferent about it, but I see it as growth of the ag industry, whether it be on the GMO and the science side, or whether it be on the more organic and what we would call natural side. So ag is booming on all those fronts.
What are some things that are important for people to know in regards to the ag industry? I know that a lot of youth who may have interest in agriculture don't necessarily understand the breadth and depth of it.
Mm-hmm. You're exactly right. And that was the point that I tried to make with one of the things that I did at the Department of Agriculture last year. I was instrumental in starting a program called the Life Sciences Quest, where high school students from urban and suburban areas of Missouri were able to come to Mizzou, get a week-long session on agriculture and the life sciences, because those two industries are very closely linked. Mm-hmm. And so the kids were able to see whether it be crops grown, they could learn about that. They were able to see how you look at these crops under a microscope at the DNA level, whether that be feed products or food products. And they were taught, instructed or told about the GMO industry, and they were able to make, decisions or educated decisions on what they thought about genetic modification, for instance. They also just got to learn about some of the challenges that agriculture is facing. We've got a booming population in the world that we've got to feed. That's very important. And so it's very important, from my perspective, to reach out to youth, especially those youth that didn't grow up on a farm, so they can understand the importance of agriculture, life sciences, and biotechnology to their everyday lives.
What are some common misconceptions about the agricultural industry?
Well, I'm not sure if they're misconceptions or not. There are a few. Let's start with some misconceptions, but there are some misconceptions, and there are just some challenges that we face based on truthful information. But let's start with the misconceptions. One of the misconceptions, the big misconception, is that GMOs are harmful. And if you look at the data, you look at the science, there's hasn't been any confirmed or any evidence supporting that GMOs are somehow dangerous.
What's a GMO?
A genetically modified
Oh,
organism.
thank you.
So that's one of the big misconceptions, And number two, some of the realities of agriculture. There's anytime you have ag land, and you may fertilize that land, and you may have nutrient runoff issues. I mean, these are facts, and these are things that we have to deal with environmentally. We have to grow food and do things in an environmentally sound way. So those are challenges that ag always faces. So we have to work closely with the Department of Conservation in the state, the Department of Natural Resources, just to make sure that there is a balance of food production, food and feed production, as well as environmental stewardship. And I think we do a good job of that for the most part.
Thank you for that, for explaining that more in depth. In regard to litigation around the ag industry, what are some common issues that come about?
We get pesticide drift issues, where someone sprays pesticide on their field and it drifts over into somebody else's, does some damage. You have regular and commercial litigation. Somebody didn't pay me, type of stuff. You have some class action lawsuits. You saw Chipotle in some trouble about branding their food as organic or non-GMO. So there's that controversy. People mislabeling products as being natural or locally grown. How do you define locally grown? Is it within 500 miles? Is it in the U.S.? Is it just stuff that's not brought in from outside the country? So you've got all kinds of labeling issues, and so you do see litigation on those fronts. And so so legal work within ag, litigation or otherwise, ranges a full spectrum. You've got a lot of employment issues. Let's say you've got a meat processing plant. Those areas and those work environments can be somewhat dangerous, and you've got to take the proper precautions to make sure people are protected. You've got immigration issues. A lot of labor force in some of the ag sectors is mostly immigrants, so you've got those issues to deal with. So litigation or legal issues around the ag industry runs the full spectrum.
So ag is something that obviously affects our everyday life for everyone. What are some things that people should know in terms of food consumption? I mean, you mentioned the challenges of knowing if something is locally grown or if it's organic. How do you know what to eat?
Yeah, exactly. I'll say this. I think that people, and we have an obesity epidemic, we have a diabetes epidemic, in American society. Our problem isn't that we're malnourished, we're overnourished. I guess overnutrition can be a form of malnutrition, to be honest. I don't know, I'm not a nutritionist, but I think we need to watch, as we enhance things such as sugar, and I'm not trying to throw the sugar industry under the bus, but as we enhance things, as we make things better, more palatable, sweeter, as restaurants and grocery stores or food manufacturers try to do, your calorie consumption is more than likely going through the roof too. So I think people, as we make food, as we make it better, as we make it more palatable, we have to understand that more calories typically come along with that, and we're not doing a good job of managing that around the country. So I think that's one thing that we need to be concerned about. While we're fighting about GMOs and things that I consider to be silly at this point, we ought to be fighting the battle of consumption, and how do we do this in a responsible way so that we're healthy.
Let's continue on around consumption and the overconsumption. What are some of the key factors that play a role in this? As you mentioned, obesity is skyrocketing through the roof, and other, what some medical professionals would say, are preventable health issues.
Well, I'll say I think it's just I know there's various conspiracy theories out there. You can watch, I could name 5 different documentaries on Netflix that can that people use to blame on why we're so unhealthy. But it comes down to personal decisions, in my perspective. You can go to a restaurant or eat fast food. Our fast food consumption in this country is tremendous, and we've got to start making the right personal dietary decisions, and we can't blame an industry. We can't blame Nestle for making too good of candy. We can't blame McDonald's because the hamburgers taste too good. We have to make good decisions. Now, a lot of people disagree on this, but I think we've done so well with food. And then we have so many choices. Just go down to the grocery store and look at the amount of choices of cheese that you have, for instance.
Yeah.
And we've got to be able to make good decisions because we've got so many things to pick from. And I think that's what it boils down to, if I answered your question.
You did. So personal decision making is having
the
will to eat the right foods and eat healthier.
That's right. Cook your food. I'll tell you this, some tips that I have. Eat natural foods, and I don't mean that's labeled natural. I mean things that if you look at it and that's the way it was grown and came out of the ground, eat it. A corn on the cob, hey, that's the way nature made it. But if it's something that's processed, cornbread, something like that, you're going to probably increase calorie density, and therefore you may have some issues. You've added eggs and flour and sugar and whatever else to it. Now you got something completely different. So processed foods, I think, are the main issue in this country. Not necessarily food itself, processed foods where a lot of sugar and fat is added. That's where you have your issues. So so cooking your own food is a good first step in solving this problem.
Thank you for that clarification and saying that, because that makes a tremendous difference, right? If everything you eat comes out of a package, then it's more than likely to have some things that could be harmful to you.
That's right, and it's things that are harmful at high levels. Sugar. No, nothing wrong with sugar, but you have it at too high levels, you're gonna have some problems. But vegetables, fruits, things and nuts, things that humans have been eating for, hundreds and thousands of years. That's the stuff that our bodies are used to. We're not used to huge amounts of sugar, and when you do that, or huge amounts of fat, and when you do that, our bodies react just like they are now with metabolic disorders. So we got to be very careful.
Will you talk a little bit about your entry into the industry early on and the type of work that you were doing?
I was always interested in science, so my love for science is what got me into agriculture. As I found out how much science is involved in our food production system, that really got me interested. And also business. I love business. I'm an economist as well. So if you're interested in science and business, this is the industry for you.
Yeah.
So that's what really sparked my interest. Number one was science, and number two was business.
There's been a move to urban agriculture. So people having these big plots of land in the heart of a city and our rooftop gardens. Do you see the trend? Where do you see the trend of that going? And how does that compare in contrast to traditional farming?
I think it's great. I saw this thing called FarmBot on YouTube. I'd encourage everyone to take a look at that. But I think it's great. If you grow your own tomatoes, your own cucumbers, your own greens, you know where it came from. You understand, how to grow. We've lost the ability to know how to grow things, and I think it's a good thing that people really enjoy doing. There's a cost savings. Well, maybe not. It depends on how you do it. If you got good practices, there may be a cost savings to it. You never know. It all depends on the individual. But I think that's a good movement, and I think that it's the best way. Number one, for people to have natural, food with no preservatives or anything on it. They can, and this is the good kind of food. This is not processed food. This is food that you grow, that you can eat. It's nutritious, and it keeps people out of the grocery stores where you do have a million selections of things. And usually when you go to the grocery store, you end up with some junk food in the cart. We all know that. And it's just a good supplement to, good healthy living, I think. So I don't see anything wrong with it. I think it's a positive movement. And I think for places too, I'm sorry. And I think for places too that they call food deserts, where people don't have a lot of food, grow your own stuff. Nobody's stopping you from doing that. I see seeds at Home Depot. You just go buy a bag of seeds and plant the stuff and see what happens. And, just give you some options. Makes you more self-reliable anyway. Go ahead.
No, absolutely. You bring up a really good point. I always wondered, and I don't know if this is a legitimate concern or not. You can provide some insight into gardens in the city and pollutants, or is that just across the board?
Oh, gardens in the city and pollutants in the city?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, those two really don't mix because then you're actually consuming it as a food. But I'll tell you, you could get, and I know air quality is an issue in the cities. Um, all that is an issue. But there are controlled indoor, facilities that people could have. That now that's going to cost you some money, or you could have kind of a, I don't know, a greenhouse. I'm not sure some certain things that can protect you to some extent. But technologies are being developed, I think, to make this kind of stuff, a little bit more viable. But I would just say you got to be careful. You got to be careful of pollutants, but at the same time, I think that this technology is catching up to make sure that people can do this in a safe way. I might never recommend doing it if it was not safe. And you can't plant stuff in the ground where there's lead or contaminants. You got to really be careful about that. So
You
get
mentioned
a soil
that
test done before you plant anything. I'll say that right now if you're going to do it in the city.
you said get a lead test done.
Or get a soil test.
A
It just
soil
tests what's in your soil. That's right, before you plant anything in the city. That's a good recommendation.
What does that process entail?
I'm not sure, but I think that you could go to any university that's got an agronomy department that could probably do that for you. Just take the soil in. Farmers do it all the time. Test the nutrients, contaminants, whatever. You can get it done.
That's such a great point. I've never heard anyone say that, and it makes sense. People just start planting stuff, but the soil determines the quality of food that you ultimately will consume.
It sure does. And protein content, your amount of nitrogen in the soil, the amount of organic matter in the soil. So you got to really, it's something you should really think about. Farmers do it. And if you're going to do it, it's not a bad thing to look into.
What inspires you most about your work? Because it's evident that you're passionate about this.
Personally, I would say that, as an African American, we, if you look at pioneers like George Washington Carver, who I felt like was a pioneer for biotechnology, that makes me very proud. When you look at, I know people don't view America's history with agriculture, especially African Americans, very favorably because of our involvement in the cotton industry and all the different industries in the South regarding agriculture. But I feel more of a link to that industry. I don't feel as though it's something to be viewed as a reason for me to not be in the industry. And I get some resistance about this when I talk to some African Americans about it. But I'll tell you, it's a booming industry. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. There's some nobility behind it with feeding the world and making sure hungry people have food and enough food to eat that I think I can overlook some of the potential negatives, of the ag industry. It has it's like everything, there's pluses and minuses. There's, some bad history, some good history. And I think that, that's kind of one of the things that motivates me and keeps me going, is just knowing how deep rooted that we are as African Americans in agriculture. I want to continue that tradition.
Darryl, that was so profound in a very personal way because my mother's family specifically grew up as sharecroppers, picking cotton. And every time we drive down to Mississippi, there are these horror stories of the cotton field. And I look at that and think, there's no way that I would ever want to be a part of that. And so that your insight about agriculture and African Americans was a shift for me. So thank you for that.
That's right.
Really needs to hear that. So back to your counsel work, who are your prospects and what types of companies do you work with?
I work with all kinds. I have farmer clients. I do estate planning. I do biotech. work. I do my team. I've got a team of about 10 people, so we do intellectual property work, we do litigation, we do corporate transactions, we do everything under the sun, from farmers to all the way down the list to end products, grocery stores, for instance. So we do it all. And the funny thing about ag law is it's just like a lot of other law. It's just agribusiness is just like any other business. It's just got different subject matter, different widgets that they're dealing with. So I have expertise in agriculture. So I want to do work 100% for ag companies one day. So, but our legal work ranges the full spectrum.
Great. I think that it's really important that there's a light shine on the industry, especially in African American communities, and especially with youth, because it may be a fit of something that they're interested in.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
If people want to learn more about the ag industry, how can they find what are good resources that people can go and read about? The way most of us do things is a good Google search, So honestly, if there's a question about food, I would, but there's a lot of good and bad resources out there. I would go to USDA and look at some of their resources. I would go to the Soybean Association, Corn Growers Association. The national and the state level resources on that are good. There's good places here there's an entity here called Gateway Greening that does a lot of urban agriculture. I would look at land-grant university websites like Lincoln University or University of Missouri Columbia and look at their extension and outreach and some of the ag work they're doing. And I think those are good places to start for youth so that they can have a college, in the back of their minds too, on where to go to actually get a degree, in food science, in biochemistry. Biochemistry degree will get you into med school if you want to, and that's an ag curriculum there. Parks, rec, and tourism. It's also part of agriculture. If you want to design golf courses, there you go. Do a field, grow turf for professional baseball teams. That's agriculture. So, the range of things you can do in ag, food science, and nutrition, things you can do in ag are very broad. So I think that people really want to learn about ag. They could really learn a lot by visiting land-grant university websites. Darryl, this has been extremely enlightening. I didn't know there was a Soybean Association. I didn't know about the land-grant university. So just thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me about your industry. If people want to reach out to you and learn more about you, how can they reach you?
They can look me up on the website, but my direct phone number is 314-259-4776. My email is dchatman, CHATMAN, @ArmstrongTeasdale.com. And they can call me and email me all the questions they like.
Perfect. Darryl, thank you so much. And I look forward to talking to you in the future.
All right. Thank you, Angela. I enjoyed it. Okay?
Okay. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.